Like most people, before we set out on the Mongol Rally last summer, my brother and I had never done anything remotely like this. It was both the longest trip we'd ever taken and the farthest we'd ever traveled in a single journey, so there were so many variables. We did know we'd probably face some obstacles along the way, and we wanted to be prepared. So I reached out to rally organizer Jules Ingram for some insight and encouragement.
So the main challenge is the car. When I did the rally, I think we broke down 35 times, which was at times quite entertaining. At times it was quite unpleasant, really. There is the navigational issues, not really knowing where you're going. Driving in a country that has either no road signs or more likely no road signs that are in English is always a good one. The quality of the roads, potholes and the like, and the quality of other drivers. People going the wrong way down one-way streets and driving with no lights, and people who you have a suspicion probably haven't got a proper driving licence, making up their own rules of the road.
Sounds like fun, right? But wait, there's more.
There's also the challenge of being on the road for 3 to 6 weeks. You know, a lot of people might have done a 6-7 hour drive, but driving 7 hours a day for 30 days is something few people have done. And being trapped in a confined space with someone who you think you know quite well can be very testing, especially when you combine it with the unfamiliar roads, the unfamiliar driving, the difficulties of the car, and food that might not agree with you. It can be quite stressful.
Several weeks into our journey, we'd already checked several of these experiences off our list. And as time went on, we were about to check some more. I'm Scott Gurian. I'm a longtime public radio and print reporter, and I've always loved traveling and experiencing different cultures, so I've created this podcast called Far From Home to document my adventures. To start off, I'm telling the story of this massive journey my brother and I took with our friends, raising money for charity. We drove nearly 11,000 miles.
11,000?
That's right, a quarter of the way around the Earth, from London to Mongolia, through 18 countries, 8 time zones, 5 mountain ranges, and a few deserts, in a ridiculously tiny car.
It's like the Beverly Hillbillies.
It's not for the faint of heart. It's the adventure, isn't it? It's just the thing of pushing yourself to the absolute limit, because I think it's going to take us out of our comfort zone, but in a really good way.
If you're just joining me, I suggest you first go back and listen to all the previous episodes in order to get up to speed and for all of this to make a bit more sense. From language barriers to car trouble, getting horribly lost, to paying bribes to shady traffic cops. It's been quite an amazing experience, and over the coming episodes, I'll be bringing all of you along with me for the ride. Turkmenistan isn't exactly a place many people go on vacation. After North Korea, it's generally thought of as one of the most isolated, reclusive, and authoritarian nations in the world, and some journalists have even described it as a hermit kingdom. It's a place few outsiders ever get the chance to visit, so we felt privileged we were able to get visas, even though they were only good for 5 days. Our journey began after we bid farewell to our guide in Iran and arrived at the Turkmenistan border station, an imposing white marble government building on a hill, adorned with a giant portrait of the country's president. We parked our car behind the cars of several other Mongol rally teams that had arrived there before us, and we entered a noisy, cavernous room with high ceilings to begin processing our paperwork. I turned to my brother and muttered under my breath,
This is probably the least inviting entrance to a country I've ever seen.
Seriously, it was like we were in the middle of a construction zone. There were guys on scaffolds spackling and painting the walls, and there was dust and paint chips covering the floor and even the seats, so we had to brush things off before we sat down. I joked with Rosie.
I mean, they're repainting it. It'll probably, next time you come to Turkmenistan, it'll be a lovely entrance.
The next time.
Meanwhile, young soldiers stood around the room watching us.
It looks like this whole place is being run by 19-year-olds in camo uniforms, fulfilling their mandatory military service.
They wore these giant silver belt buckles and broad-brimmed ranger hats, and they looked bored. One of them took out a brush and began polishing his boots. The other thing about this room, which I didn't immediately notice, was that the only illumination came from the sunlight streaming in the windows.
You said the power is out?
Electricity's out, yeah.
Or this whole building, I guess.
Why there's no lights on it?
Well, I don't know. I thought the lights are always off. That's just how they welcome you to Turkmenistan in the dark.
Few people spoke more than a handful of words in English, and customer service didn't quite seem like one of their strengths, but we did our best to go with the flow.
So we've handed our passports and our printed out visas to someone on the other side of a wall. They took it, slammed the door shut, and we're waiting here now for who knows how long.
A guy we spoke to from one of the other teams told us he'd already been there over an hour, and it looked like the customs officials had now left on some sort of break. Rosie caught sight of one of them taking a nap.
I just don't understand, like, logistically what they do, like, when they hold your passports for hours, like, what are they actually doing? I know it's not computerized, none of it, so obviously that adds some time.
My brother joked that they were probably all in the back, binging on Netflix. Rosie remarked that they were just acting like government workers in many parts of the world who don't have any incentive to actually give a shit. Finally, they returned with our passports. A woman unlocked the door and ushered us into a room with a desk, which she called the bank. The power was still out, so it was pitch black in there, but we all held up our cell phones to provide light while she collected our money for the visa processing fee, all the while shouting something that none of us could understand. This was our first exposure to how we'd soon realize things tended to work in post-Soviet Central Asia. After that, we shuffled from building to building and office to office, filling out all sorts of mysterious forms and signing our names to documents we barely understood. Basically, we just did whatever they told us, because really, what other choice did we have? By the way, if you've ever wondered if there's anywhere in the world where they still use carbon paper, like actual black carbon paper, I could report that Turkmenistan is one of the holdouts. The whole experience was incredibly exhausting, and it felt like we were trapped in some sort of bureaucratic version of an Escher painting. Finally, after a quick inspection of our car's contents and one more check of our visas and passports, we were allowed to enter the country.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yep. Are we all set? We're finished?
Okay.
Yeah? Okay.
Yes, you're finished.
Okay.
Don't worry, sir.
Okay.
You are in Turkmenistan.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Appreciate it.
No problem.
Okay. Thank you. Goodbye.
We adjusted our watches for the odd half-hour time change, and then my brother Drew and I set out on our way.
We're driving now on this 2-lane road that's basically just these amazing scenic mountains. And, whoa.
Are we going to drive through safari?
It really looks like that. There was some horses on the side of the road a little while back, and now there's these wild, I want to say they're gazelles or something. They're sort of like deer, but...
The big one in front has horns.
Those big horns like pointing
backwards?
Curved, pointing backwards. Look at these mountains. These mountains are amazing. We're technically not allowed to take any photos here because it's on a military base, but it's hard to resist. This scenery is just awe-inspiring. I didn't know anything about Turkmenistan, but I was envisioning just all flat desert. So I guess we are exiting the base here. We're going through a gate. There's barbed wire all around. We are coming to the other side. And there's some soldiers walking down the road in military camo garb with big guns slung over their shoulders.
It's quite an interesting welcome to a country.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not particularly known for their military, are they?
Turkmenistan isn't really known for anything. No one even, seriously, no one thinks of Turkmenistan.
No.
It's just not a country that most people even know exists. I mean, this was all part of the Soviet Union until a few decades ago.
We'd been driving through the wilderness with rolling hills and mountains that extended as far as we could see in all directions, when suddenly we rounded a corner and saw the skyline of Ashgabat, Turkmenistan's capital city, off in the distance.
That's impressive.
We followed the road down from the mountain, drove through the city's ceremonial gate, and entered its outskirts, and it immediately seemed different from anywhere else we had ever been. I was trying to figure out just what it was about this place, but Drew put his finger on it pretty quickly.
Everything is white. It's horrible.
That's true. I hadn't thought of that.
He was describing the mile after monotonous mile of grandiose government buildings and nearly identical-looking apartment blocks made of white marble imported from Italy. It all seemed a bit artificial, like, you know that feeling when a friend or a relative who you're not very close to buys you a fancy birthday gift thinking you'll love it, but you have no use for it and it's not at all your style? That's kind of how Ashgabat felt. I read up on the city's history, and most of it was apparently destroyed in a giant earthquake back in 1948, which killed 100,000 people. It was rebuilt during the Soviet era, and then over the past few decades after the country became independent, large swaths of neighborhoods were demolished and rebuilt once again to make room for this more modern architecture, as well as monuments to the country's former leader, who banned the circus, ballet, and opera, renamed the days of the week and the months of the year after himself and his relatives, and built a giant 24-carat gold leaf statue of himself that rotated to always face the sun. Our guidebook had described Ashgabat as a cross between Las Vegas and Pyongyang, and we thought that seemed about right. Everything was a bit over the top, so it was hard not to drive around with our jaws constantly open. Where are we? My brother kept asking.
What is that thing up on the hill? There's some kind of monument, a big pointy thing.
There's these strange buildings down there. It's like that oval building, and then the one next to it. See that goldish thing? Like, that's incredible looking. Looks like a UFO.
Look at that big monument there on the left. This is really like Disney World. It's one monument after another. Look at the landscaping. Everything is so pristine. The perfectly manicured grass and shrubbery around the sides. It's kind of sterile.
Yeah, very sterile.
A little bit soulless.
Oh, completely soulless.
But at least initially, that's where our reactions diverged.
This is really fascinating.
So uncomfortable with it.
Just go with the flow. Just,
I feel like we're in outer space. It's a substantial city with all new infrastructure and nobody here.
Which brings me to the other thing we noticed that was really odd. Considering this was Turkmenistan's largest city, with a population of more than 1 million, the streets were strangely quiet, with hardly any other people or vehicles in sight.
It looks like the city is brand new and has never been touched.
yeah, basically.
Like we're the first people to drive on these newly opened roads.
Pretty much. It looks like the city just opened for business.
This is supposed to be what it feels like to go to a city after like a nuclear explosion. There's nobody here.
Well, we're not right downtown yet.
Scott.
No, we're like on we're on a ring road or something.
We've seen like 5 cars since we've gotten into the city.
Maybe they have a really good public transportation network.
I was mostly being sarcastic because I didn't really have any better answers than he did, and my confusion only deepened the farther we went.
Okay, well now we're downtown and now there's no cars here either.
Seriously, where is everybody? I'm so confused.
I'd already felt a bit uncomfortable about Turkmenistan after researching the country prior to our trip. It had a pretty miserable human rights record, and it ranked 3rd from the bottom in press freedom, just above Eritrea and North Korea. What's more, Mehdi, our guide in Iran, had told us about a trip he'd taken to Turkmenistan several years earlier, where it seemed like he and his group were constantly being watched. That's right, this guy came from Iran, which isn't exactly known for being the most democratic place, and even he was creeped out by Turkmenistan. Rosie and Jane were driving in the car ahead of us. They spoke up on the walkie-talkie and echoed what we were feeling.
Yeah, I don't know.
Throwing everybody into jail?
What was that? Oh, no, you watch what you say on the walkie-talkies.
What'd you say?
They threw everybody into jail.
That's fine.
Drew, anyone could be listening. I gotta be careful.
You don't have to tell them that and be like the police.
Drew, I don't want
Everybody's
anyone.
an adult.
But sometimes people don't think, and we just gotta have common sense.
And as if to add credence to my fear that perhaps we were being monitored or watched, it was just a few minutes later, as we approached an empty intersection, that we were flagged to the side.
Is he pulling us over? There's a cop in the middle directing traffic. I think he's pulled us over.
We weren't speeding, and we couldn't figure out what we had done wrong, aside from driving ridiculous-looking rally cars with foreign plates, but maybe that was enough. The cop approached Rosie and Jane's car, since it was in the lead. He didn't write a ticket or seem like he was scolding us in any way. Instead, he simply held us there for several minutes, sort of engaging in small talk, but he didn't speak any English, and we couldn't understand any Turkmen, so we had no idea what he said. It's almost like he was stalling time while he listened to someone talking to him in some sort of earpiece. And then, this part is still hard to believe, but more cars suddenly started appearing on the roads around us, almost like actors walking on stage late for the performance, and he let us continue on our way. Looking back later on, we all tried to figure it out, but we couldn't quite shake the crazy feeling that we were in some sort of real-life Truman Show, where Jim Carrey's character realized that everything was a facade, a show being put on just for him, and everyone around him seemed to somehow be in on it.
Maybe I'm losing my mind, but it feels like the whole world revolves around me somehow.
The whole experience shook us up a bit, so when my brother spoke to Rosie on the radio a short while later, she decided to urge caution.
What's up with all these really, really weird monuments all over the place?
Probably this is my paranoia speaking, she said.
But we should probably be a little bit careful about what we say on this frequency just in case we're being tracked.
Told you.
Sure, absolutely.
See?
Well, I don't think that was anything bad.
The more time we spent in Turkmenistan, the weirder the country seemed. We arrived at our lodging for the night, an upscale 5-story hotel in downtown Ashgabat. I wish I could show you a picture, but it was across the street from some sort of important government building, so the front desk clerk warned us photos were strictly prohibited. Overall, it was a pretty nice place, though, with 2 swimming pools, a spa, restaurant, and a gift shop. There was just one thing missing: other people. Even at the breakfast buffet the next morning, there was only one other guest. Now, the logical part of me tried to come up with explanations. It is hard to get a visa to Turkmenistan, I figured, so maybe it's not so surprising that we'd be some of the few tourists. Plus, it was the middle of summer, the hottest and most uncomfortable time of the year, so maybe there were more visitors in cooler months. But as lots of little strange things continued to pile up, it became harder and harder to make sense of it all. I wondered at the time if we were going crazy, unknowingly assembling a series of random coincidences in our minds to manufacture some sort of black helicopter conspiracy theory. But I stopped pinching myself after speaking later on to another rallier named Joe Rittenhouse. He was also passing through Ashgabat around this time with his teammates from Pennsylvania and a bunch of their friends, and they had their own reasons to feel creeped out.
We rolled into this hotel. It was about $100 a night. It had like really nice rooms, and we all decided, all right, we're going to stay here. And 2 of our British friends, Elliot and I think it was Fergal, they were like trying to negotiate with this woman who'd be like, all right, come on, let's negotiate prices here. How about $80 or like $90 instead of $100? And the woman behind the counter was like, no. And she like pointed to all these cameras behind her, and she's like, they are always watching us. And Elliot was like, holy crap, what is she talking about? And so then we kind of settled in for the night, but it just got weirder and weirder as the night went on.
There was an 11 p.m. citywide curfew, so a late night out on the town was out of the question. Luckily, their hotel had its own dance club.
A bunch of the people in our group decided, hey, we've all just done Iran. Let's go get some drinks because we haven't had alcohol in, X amount of days. Let's just have a party. We went into the bar and we sat down, and the guy from the bar was like, you should go down into disco. And we're like, yeah, let's do that. And there's about, I'd say, 20 of us staying in this hotel. And it was weird because there were only about like 6 or 7 people in that club. And then all of a sudden, like 20 of us rocked up. And we were having a blast, and we were drinking a good amount. They're playing like Western music, and we were just really excited. But then it just got so bizarre. Jamie, one of the Aussies that was with us, he bought a big bottle of vodka and was like, everybody gets shots. Well, they bought this bottle of vodka, and we watched. They took the money, handed it to one of the, security guys in the room, and then he walked around and he paid all the Turkmen people dancing in the club. And one of the Scots with us was like, holy crap, look at this guy. And he walked over to this guy. He's a little intoxicated. He's like, you were our border guard. You're the guy who stamped our passports. And they started to realize that like everybody in this club was somehow related to the border or the border guards or like government officials, and it just all of a sudden it just took this really weird and eerie tone because like we were the ones dancing, they weren't drinking, they were just kind of watching us, and it was just so insane. That whole Ashgabat stay was really bizarre for us because I constantly felt like we were being watched, I guess. In fact, I found this thing in the chandelier of our apartment when I was just drunkenly standing on my bed. And I looked up in the chandelier and it's a bunch of plastic tubes hanging down, like you couldn't really see behind it. But there were buttons on the side of it and had like a play record button, and there was a part for an SD card, and it looked like someone had put like a makeshift recording device into the chandelier. It could have been anything from like a sound system, but it was so bizarrely hidden that it was just really eerie for all of us when we were like in that hotel.
After hearing these sorts of stories, we started locking our bags whenever we left our hotel rooms, and the dark humor set in. We joked that a guy we saw sitting in his car at the other end of the parking lot was an undercover government minder keeping tabs on us and periodically reporting back to headquarters. Maybe he'd even place a tracking device on our vehicles while we were sleeping in the dead of night. But as we set out the following morning, we laughed that if anyone was in fact trying to follow us, they were probably getting incredibly frustrated since we kept getting totally lost.
This city is impossible to find your way around. There's not a single street sign in the whole city.
Here's the map. Our hotel was right over here. If we wanted to go that way and make a left, but we had to go down there and make that U-turn there around the circle, where we should have gone straight, it teed off. So then we just like went till what I thought was the next main street, which I thought took us like down here, and then we made this right, which I thought might have been this.
The woman in the hotel did say she thought this map was a little bit old. I think the pace of construction in the city is so quick, it's like things are out of date the moment they're printed.
Ashgabat was preparing to host a regional sports expo that would attract people from throughout Asia, so the country's rulers had spent billions of dollars to essentially remake the city and prepare it for its place in the world's spotlight. But with much of the downtown now in the process of being rebuilt, roads were closed, and many intersections looked nothing in the real world like they had once looked on paper.
This is really crazy.
Our GPS didn't work, and when we tried asking for directions, no one was able to show us exactly where we were on the map. On top of that, with most of the city consisting of nondescript white buildings, there were no discernible landmarks, and everything looked basically the same.
How long have we been driving around?
Probably not more than 45 minutes or an hour. But we've stopped no less than probably 5 or 6 times.
Yeah.
Because we're completely and utterly lost.
And we're really getting a tour of the city. It's funny, people keep honking at us and waving at us here, but it's different than Iran. Iran, it was like they were honking and they were excited to see us, and here it's just more curiosity, like who the hell are these people?
Sure, I don't disagree with you.
After wandering around aimlessly all morning, we finally managed to find our way out of the city and head north into the Karakum Desert, one of the hottest and driest places on Earth. We spent hours driving past sand dunes and camels out for a midday stroll. And let me just say, if you've never seen a camel in the wild before, they're actually pretty strange and fascinating creatures to watch. Shortly before sunset, we arrived at the remote outpost of Darvaza, basically a small building atop a hill that was roughly the midpoint of our entire journey, and a site we had been looking forward to for months. It was near here that we planned to meet up with dozens of other rally teams for a night of camping and celebration at what had been billed the Mad Hatter's Tea Party. It was hard to drive to the precise location of the festivities, given that our little cars weren't good at handling off-road treks through the sand, so we paid a local guy to take us in his 4x4. It was golden hour as the sun sank to the horizon, casting a gorgeous light over the already pretty landscape, so our driver put on some appropriate relaxing music to heighten the mood. Suddenly, and without warning, he changed to a different track as we came over a hill.
Yeah!
And then we saw it.
Oh, there it is.
Oh, left, look to the left! Holy
God,
shit!
holy crap!
Oh, look at the light coming up! Oh my god!
Oh, guys, this is even better than I expected.
Holy
oh
shit!
My God.
You'll have to excuse our language, because what we were looking at ahead of us was totally breathtaking. There in the middle of the desert, surrounded by miles of nothingness, was the so-called Door to Hell, a giant crater bigger than a football field, and the whole thing was literally on fire. Our driver dropped us off, and we walked over to take a closer look. Rosie said it was simultaneously frightening and awe-inspiring. This, my friends, is what hell looks like, she said.
Make sure that in your life you're a good person. Oh, Jane.
Just then, the wind blew in our direction, and a giant gust of hot air sent us scrambling back from the crater's edge.
Whoa, that's hot.
Heat is amazing.
So we're looking at this giant pit in the ground, like 200 feet across. We're just surrounded by deserts, kind of hills here, and then the land suddenly just drops off, and down there's rocks and dirt that's kind of caved into a kind of a crater in the bottom, and all throughout it there's patches of fire, just bright orange fire burning from, I guess, natural gas seeping up from the ground. And looking across, the air is all kind of wavy, from all the gas escaping. You do smell some natural gas coming up, like as if there was a gas leak, which I guess it is, a gas leak from the earth.
This is so otherworldly. Look at that plume of flame. This is absolutely nuts.
The story goes that some Soviets exploring for natural gas had a bit of a mishap at some point back in the 60s or 70s when their drilling rig collapsed into this sinkhole. No one knows exactly what happened because there appeared to be a cover-up, and the details have long since been lost to history. But basically, someone got the bright idea to light the pit on fire to burn off the escaping gases that could have been harmful to people in the nearby village. They figured it might burn for a week or so, but Turkmenistan has the 6th largest natural gas reserves in the world, so it probably shouldn't be a surprise that it continues to burn several decades later, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. We hung out for a while, and then the party began.
So it's a little later now, and a bunch of the teams have arrived, and everyone just kind of gazing all around the pit, taking pictures, got their cars here, starting some music and setting up tents. This is really incredible.
I spoke to a bunch of folks, but I think James Tuffle from Oxford in southern England captured the moment best.
So to set the scene, we have a clear, starry night, and we are currently camped out eating dodgy chicken curry by a fire pit that's been burning for 40 years in the middle of the Turkmenistan desert, one of the most closed countries in the world. And we drove here from London. It's utterly surreal on so many levels.
We'd all been on the road for several weeks by this point, so I was curious to hear how some of the other teams were doing. Ferdinando Menezes was traveling with his sister-in-law's brother, Ashrad. They had really different travel styles, he said, so it had been hard at times being cooped up together in a tiny car. You see, Ashrad was the more organized and responsible one, focused always on the itinerary, while Ferdy tended to be more flippant. He said he was thankful to Ashrad for not ditching him on the side of the road after he got drunk and belligerent at a beach party they'd attended a week earlier in Romania. Overall, though, he seemed to be enjoying the trip.
So far, it's going really well. In terms of making ground, in terms of how everything's panned out. Car's done us quite well. We've had a few little bits and bobs. And yeah, it's been good. We're kind of at the point now where you're halfway, so you're thinking about the end. And it's really dangerous to do that because you think, okay, what's going to happen there? What's going to happen? But around the corner is a rock that could fucking end your whole rally. So you don't know.
I didn't totally realize it at the time, but Ferdy's words would prove to be remarkably insightful in the days ahead. You see, we'd already been on the road for about 3 weeks at this point, and like he said, we'd driven more than 5,000 miles, or nearly half of our entire journey. But much of that had been on well-paved highways across Europe. So, sure, it was easy to fantasize about everything that lay ahead of us, like the majestic mountains we looked forward to seeing in Tajikistan, the untamed wilderness of Mongolia, and what it would be like to eventually cross the finish line. But we still had 4 weeks to go, and there were so many uncertainties that it was probably best to take things a day at a time. Chief among our concerns were our annoying car problems that seemed to keep rearing their ugly heads, despite numerous visits to mechanics and multiple attempts to get the issues under control. They'd unfortunately come back to haunt us yet again a couple of days later as we were driving across the eastern part of the country.
So we are on the side of the road in Turkmenistan. My brother was driving along and suddenly we lost acceleration. There was some kind of clicking sound and we stepped on the accelerator and the car started slowing down. We noticed the temperature gauge was going up and oil light or some kind of check engine light or something that started blinking. And so we pulled over to the side. We've opened up the hood and we're not quite sure what to do here.
Jane took a look and remarked that our radiator expansion tank, which had usually been the culprit in the past, was actually totally full of water this time.
Yeah, the water level's fine. That's what we're worried about. This is something else. And the oil's still wet. It's all wet.
That's wet. The bottom of the radiator's wet.
Oh, shit.
I wonder what it's leaking from.
We used our cell phones to illuminate the dark crevices around our engine until my brother found what he was looking for.
I think we have a hole in the radiator.
Oh, you're joking?
No. Have you ever had one before and seen one?
No.
Shit. All right. Because I think this is one. I took a picture of it.
Oh, God. Is that it? I can see a kind of a hole there.
I mean, there's a lot of indentations from stuff hitting it, but I'm pretty sure
like
that's
a hole.
I agree.
We'd been driving behind a dump truck a while back, and we guessed that maybe it had kicked up a small pebble that had caused the puncture. My brother noted that this was just the latest in a long line of problems, and that he wasn't very hopeful about our car.
Yeah, I feel like it's been on its last legs for the last few weeks in a certain way. It's just been problems that have been not ever really solved.
Kevin and Lyndon, who'd been tagging along with us and knew just what to do when we overheated in Iran, had by now driven on ahead with some other rally teams, so it was just the four of us left to figure things out. I tried to make light of the situation.
Maybe we should call AAA.
We stood there for a few minutes debating our options when a good Samaritan in a minivan came to our rescue.
This guy's stopping real quick.
This guy's stopping? Oh, maybe someone could help us.
Do you speak English?
English? No. A little bit. Hello. We think it's the radiator. I don't know.
We did our best with pointing and hand signals to describe the problem. After assessing the situation, he lifted our radiator cap.
Okay, we're putting in more water. Oh, look at that. The water's squirting out the bottom of the radiator. Oh my gosh. Wow.
We found the hole.
Yes, we certainly did.
Is it where we thought it was?
Yes.
The guy said we'd need to get it taken care of by a mechanic in the next big town called Mari.
Mari. How far?
Kilometers. Murray.
He reached down with his finger and drew a number in the dirt.
80 to Murray. Oh, it's far.
Yeah.
That's 50 miles.
That's like an hour. 80 kilometers, he's saying? That's what he's saying.
We tried to get him to call a tow truck, but he didn't understand, so we turned to Plan B and got out our trusty tow rope we had packed for the occasion. I asked Jane,
do you think your car has the power to tow us?
Slowly.
I don't want to cause damage to your car either, because an hour is a long way to tow.
But we didn't really have a choice. We said goodbye to the guy.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
As he pulled away and my brother started connecting the rope from Jane's car to ours, we tried to look on the bright side.
It happened in the middle of the day, in the middle of fucking nowhere.
Well, no, hey, at least we're not in the desert. We're not in the desert, okay? That's a plus.
That's a plus.
All joking aside, Rosie admitted this really wasn't the worst thing in the world.
At least we know we need a new radiator.
Well, hopefully, if we get a new radiator, that'll be the end of all of our problems. Yeah, exactly.
Just as long as we're out of Turkmenistan tomorrow when our visas expire, we'll be fine.
Yeah.
Looking back at this moment now, I'm amazed at how foolishly optimistic and naive we were, how we thought there'd be a simple solution, and how everything would easily work out, since that's not at all how things happened. Our car problems this time were the worst they'd been, and the clock was ticking down as we faced a strict deadline to leave the country. Things were about to get interesting. Visit my website at farfromhomepodcast.org to watch a video of the four of us approaching the door to hell. Because, as much as I try to describe it, it's one of those things that's so incredibly visual, you really just have to see it. and I think you'll agree it's pretty amazing. I've also posted some photos of that supposed listening device Joe Rittenhouse found in his hotel room chandelier. I'm not convinced it actually was a bug, but I can't figure out what the heck it is. So take a look yourself and let me know what you think. Next time on the show, we channel our inner MacGyvers in a harebrained attempt to fix our car problems once and for all.
You got the egg?
I have the egg. We have the pressurized radiator cap off. Need to find a good surface to
Crack an egg on the engine.
right on the battery.
Remember, you could sign up for my newsletter on my website or follow Far From Home Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. I want to give a shout out, as always, to the Public Radio Exchange for podcast hosting and technical support. You can check them out at prx.org. And if you're looking for a great way to discover other new podcasts, check out the Radio Public app, which provides handcrafted playlists that let you sample episodes from a variety of shows. Finally, if you use iTunes, please remember to log in and give a rating or write a quick review of Far From Home to help other people find it. And if you don't know how to do that, I've posted step-by-step instructions on the support page at farfromhomepodcast.org. It'll just take a few seconds, but it really makes a big difference. Thanks for listening.
We constantly felt like they were watching us. You know, every time we went somewhere, it felt like there was someone there just specifically to, like, look at us. And I was really concerned that I was just, like, putting it all in my head. Like, I'm not that important. They wouldn't do all this big show. But everything felt so centrally planned. Like, there's definitely something about that place that feels a little off.